My name is Ritvik Rajay and my cast is back with another beautiful episode. We have had a fair few guests with us till now, coming from various walks of life, from various industries, telling us their tricks of the trade, giving a perspective to marketing and advertising from their immense experience. But today, we'll be taking a different road to understand this gentleman's perspective. He has travelled wide and far for his art form, and all of us don't just know him, but he is revered across the nation as the pioneer of modern dance, recognized twice for his contribution by the Government of India. So join me in welcoming the honoured guest for today, Padma Shri Astad Deboo. Welcome, sir.
Good morning.
How do you feel?
Great.
Amazing.
It's a nice, sunny, cool morning.
Definitely. Before we go into the discussion, before we start anything, how do you like MICA? What is the first perspective when you enter the college and what do you see?
Well, I just came to know of MICA a few weeks ago. I wasn't even aware of your campus. And when I arrived last month for the first time, I was very impressed with the layout of the campus and how long it has been in existence. Mm-hmm. So it was quite impressive. For me, it was an education. And I am looking forward to this evening's performance and sharing my work with your US students and guests who have come for the conference.
Beautiful. We'll look forward to your performance, sir. If you would like to know, how do you think that, India's multiple art forms have evolved, and especially performance arts, because you definitely come from that particular part of the artist side of India. So how do you think that it has evolved in the side that from the viewership side, from the performance art side? So all of that in amalgamation, how it has completely evolved?
Well, my journey began from the age of 6 of studying as a young lad, where my parents had the foresight of seeing or recognizing the talent in me, and I was sent to study Kathak. I grew up in Jamshedpur, and as a young child, I was sort of very much immersed. And as I became a teenager, I got more and more interested. Mm-hmm. And that's when the flags went up from my parents' side. So when I graduated from school, I really wanted to go to study at the Film Institute. But my father said, no, you've got to have an education. So I came to Mumbai. And I was enrolled in the R.A. Podar College and did a 4-year course of Commerce and Economics. Okay. And I wanted to continue to pursue studying dance, but my father's brothers, who were my guardians, had not taken to my liking dance in a very favorable view. So my father said, well, we'll have to put it on hold. Mm-hmm. And it was during that period of time I saw an American dance company come, and that when I was open to a completely new form of movement, presentation, because in Indian classical dance, it's now things have changed also in the Indian class, but primarily it's been a solo performing arena for the people who sort of managed to make it to the top of the ladder. Sure. So all this sort of got me very interested. I was in that very impressionable age. Mm-hmm. Also the fact that I noticed that there was, no, I won't say experimentation, but there was sort of looking at theatre, music, visual arts. There was an evolution happening. Mm-hmm. But in dance, there was nothing at that point of time. So, and I asked my father, as I was about to graduate, I had come across a school friend of mine who had just come back from Europe hitchhiking. Wow. So I said, so he gave me all the tricks and the ropes of it, and I presented it to my father, that this is what I'd like to do. And here, once again, I was very blessed. There wasn't a single, I recall, of any argument or to saying like, we don't know anybody, how are you going to go, why do you want to take this? So I got my passport, got my visas, and I sailed out on a cargo boat from Bombay onto the port of Khurramshahr in Iran. And in those days, you could not leave the country as you can leave today freely. Sure. You had to get special permission from the Reserve Bank. But the loophole was that if you went as a laborer, out to the Gulf, and my co-passengers were goats, sheep, other laborers who were going.
Wow.
So that's how one sort of left, and I arrived in the port of Khorramshahr in Iran. And the first night I slept in a gurudwara, and the next day my magic thumb took me to all across Europe,
Wow.
Turkey, and brought me to the coast of Dover, and from there to London. And my original idea was to go to the US, but as I had not taken my visa from India, came across a lot of hurdles in London, and in those days there was no fax, there was no mobile, so everything, whatever was required, came on the snail mail. So to cut a long story short, I sort of said, okay, fine. But I did start studying the Martha Graham dance technique, because in modern dance also, there were a lot of pioneers. A couple of the early ones had their own style.
Sure.
So in order to sort of, as I grew up in Kathak, so if you were studying modern dance in those days, Martha Graham was the queen bee, and you learned. And I sort of did a barter with the London School of Contemporary Dance, where I would teach Kathak, and I could take classes. So that's how I sort of was able to pay for my fee of studying. And but within 3 months, I realized that that wasn't the style which I thought I would like to study. So then I said, okay, fine, I'm not going back home. For the next 7.5 years, I traveled on all the 5 continents. And then I came home once briefly, and it was during my brief return, a dance critic who saw me dance said, you should study Kathakali. That would help you. So the first few months that I was there, I studied a little bit as an introduction, and I was blessed to have a good guru who was quite open to accepting me, because when I came back in the end of 77, I did encounter a lot of uphill task of getting approval of the Indian dance gurus to accept a style which I was trying to introduce. So that's how I began. It's sort of, and the journey still continues.
Definitely. So there are a lot of learnings from the long journey, in short, that you just explained to us.
Right.
The first one would be about the parents and how they were so open-minded towards accepting who you were and what you wanted to do.
Right.
And I think that's a very subtle and very important message for parents all across India.
Absolutely.
They need to give that much freedom, that much control to your kids about their own lives.
Yeah. Well, also the fact that my parents always looked at the pros and cons before giving their approval.
Sure.
So, I mean, there was a lot of, not resistance, but there was a lot of sort of concern about from relatives and from my parents, friends, that you're letting your only son go, and you all don't know anybody. How is he going to manage? But the fact that I had the confidence, and I look at it as each day was a gift for me.
Sure.
Because the kind of experiences I encountered, a few unpleasant moments also, but by and large, everything was sort of, as I said, a surprise. Meeting people, seeing all the wonderful sights which one had read in the geography and history books.
Definitely, yes.
So, and yes, I had that spirit of adventure, because if you didn't have that, it doesn't move ahead.
Definitely. And the other lesson, which is very huge, is even though you're being true to your art form, it's very important that you might not like something after going into it, and it's important to know when to move out of it, rather than struggling through like you did with Martha Graham. Like, you tried the art form and you did not like it, and then within 3 months you were out of it. So going so far to achieve something that you wanted so hard, and then realizing that it's not actually for you, and having that confidence and strength to move away from it, detach from it, it's very important to understand that. And I think especially in the culture of India, where people are asked to go into something and stay there for a long period of time and not move ahead, not move around, just stay there. It's very important lesson to understand that even though you don't like it, you can move out and you can try something new.
Yeah. Well, as I said, that also the individual who has to take the decision,
Definitely.
Whether he or she is ready for it. So, I mean, it's on your side, everything looks hunky dory for what I'm saying.
Definitely, yes.
You know, but I mean, yes, I never really through my years. Somebody asked me, did you ever feel, because there was a lot of resentment when I returned to India to start a movement of contemporary dance, modern dance, as you called it, to step out of the tradition, and the fact that the people in power, the gurus, had their blinkers on, because again for them that was their art form, and they felt that by an outsider like me trying to come and do something was sort of diminishing or sort of belittling the which was not the case.
Definitely, yeah. So obviously change is hard to come by, and especially at that point of time when it was all to stick by the Indian code of conduct and Indian culture, it was very difficult for something new to be introduced.
I mean, I'll just give you a little anecdote. Once when I had sort of started working in India, and I had to go to the Ministry of Culture. I was trying to get a grant, and the Secretary Culture said, "Mr. Deboo, you're a pioneer, so you will get recognition posthumously. Pioneers have to suffer." So I took it in good stride, and when I was given my first award by the Government of India, the Sangeet Natak Academy Award, I found out where he was posted, because by then he had moved on to another department, and I wanted to say, "अफसोस की बात है कि जीते जी मुझे recognition मिला है."
Beautiful. Amazing. So, given the art form that you come from, performance art and especially contemporary Indian music, and so how does storytelling get involved in performance arts? Because we have a huge theatre society called Sankalp at MICA, and we have been performing a lot of plays. And last time we performed a play through the eyes of Draupadi, so enacting the entire Mahabharata through the eyes of Draupadi, and then we had an entire sequence of dance where the Swayamvar happens between Arjun and Draupadi. So how do you exactly come across, or how do you exactly represent storytelling as a medium through dance?
Like, yes, our Indian classical dance is storytelling.
Yes.
So, but even in contemporary dance, I mean, I've very rarely taken anything from the Ramayana or the Mahabharata in my interpretation. Sure. The only time I did a work which was called Thanatomorphia, The Many Faces of Death, and there I sort of took stories of Yama, who is the god of death.
Yes.
So I portrayed in the choreography of death as in itself, that death as a dancer, death as a lover, death as liberator, and death as celebration. So these were sort of vignettes which comprised and created the whole choreography. But storytelling of, I've done a piece on a drug addict, which is very relevant. I've done a piece on sort of mental illness called Asylum. I've done my present work, my most recent work, which I just premiered in the month of November, is based on Mahatma Gandhi's quotes.
Wow.
And the quotes which I have selected, some of them resonate with what is happening in the country today. So there I'm telling a story again.
Sure.
So yes, the storytelling is, but at the same time, in contemporary dance, you can just sort of move and show the form. Like if you go to see a contemporary painting and you see the painter stroke and he titles it. So similarly, what I would do in sort of representing an abstract form, like I was just coming into the studio and I saw the courtyard, and the courtyard was very interesting to do a performance.
Yes.
I could just visualize using that space and bringing the space into the performance, and not just that dance has to be done on a proscenium theatre.
Definitely.
So these things again have, and again, if you look even in our tradition, in the olden times when dances were done in temples, and everything was done in the village, there was really no sort of stage set up, and so the temple courtyard or whatever was used. So coming on to in today's sort of presentation, the theatres have become important because again, yes, there are lights, sets, all that sort of enhances the production.
Definitely. Beautiful. Can you give us a little bit of idea about what you're performing
What am I
at
performing
MICA?
this evening? I'm performing three pieces.
Sure.
The first piece is called Ahavan.
All right.
Now, in Indian classical dance, when the dancer begins, they offer their prayer to either Lord Ganesha,
All
to
right.
Shiva.
All right.
In my case, I'm offering my work to the space and the body, because which is both very important. Otherwise, a performance cannot take place. And the music that I have selected is from the school of Drupad singing,
All right.
and there is a singer called Amelia Cooney,
All right.
an Italian who's been trained in Drupad. So it's her soundtrack that I am using it to present the first piece. The second piece is called Stepping Out.
All right.
Okay, and again, the music is a saxophone player, Gert Anklem, from Berlin. Even Amelia has performed live with me, and we've done shows. And similarly, Gert and I have done a couple of performances, primarily in Germany. So I've used his soundtrack. So the title "Stepping Out" itself is explanatory.
Yes.
Now that is so I don't spoon feed my audiences. I sort of will give it a title, and there may be one or two lines, and then after that I would like you all to make your own interpretation. And again, another little anecdote I'll bring here. One of my set designers, who's an architect, he says, I'm going to give you three objects of a triangle, rectangle, and a cube,
Sure.
and let's see how you work with it, and what kind of an interpretation you would do. So I was performed this work in Germany, and I was working with a rectangle. And after the performance, the German spectator came and said, I saw you dancing in your coffin. Because of the fact that it was a rectangle and I was in and out. And well, I said, okay, that's your. But I said that I was not doing anything macabre. I was just wanting you to see me as a catalyst of using these objects and how they are moving in space. So stepping out again is sort of, you will notice, it's basically stepping out from the tradition into the present day modern world.
Beautiful.
And the last work I've taken is from Rabindranath Tagore's song. It's called "Every Fragment of Dust is Awakened." So there is a poem which I have sent, and so that'll be. And there I have a Japanese composer whose music has been selected for this particular piece.
It's so exciting to understand that these are all Indian classical music or Indian classical art forms that are being performed by artists all across the world. And it's very interesting to realize that you are again using it to perform it in India. So it's a kind of a paradox that is happening here, isn't it?
No, why won't I perform it in India?
No, it's the kind of that the inspiration is from India for the music which has gone out,
Right.
and then it's coming back to India from somebody else on the outside.
Right.
So that's kind of
Well, today it's called, as you call it, globalization.
globalization. Yeah, yes. Definitely. So how is contemporary dance form in India performing or is faring? Because today there are a fair few enthusiasts for Indian classical music or Indian classical dance forms, especially the youth generation, the millennial generation, and henceforth. So, what are the challenges that Indian dance forms are facing right now, performance arts or contemporary Indian dance forms?
Well, today, unfortunately, if you see even in the television media, there's not a single channel which has a program of culture. I mean, Doordarshan used to have, but today very, very few people watch Doordarshan. The fact that so Bollywood has become sort of the king of culture, which is very sad, because not that the Indian classical performing arts, whether it's music or dance or theatre, has taken a back seat. I mean, in the South, you are. I've just come from Chennai, and December is the sort of busiest month of performances of music, dance, and performances begin from 6 in the morning, which goes on, to the early evenings.
Wow.
I don't think anywhere in the world that this kind of intense performances in music and dance happens. The Indian classical dance form still there are takers, there are students who go to study and perform. In contemporary dance, again, I'm sad to say that during my journey and having come back to India, I have opened up an umbrella, and it's also recognized by the Sangeet Natak Academy. But the people who want to go into that arena, the younger generation, because dance has now become quite open and there are various forms of dance, they say we're doing contemporary dance. And I said, okay, fine. They use this word, and I said, kya sikha hai? Contemporary. I said, kya sikha hai? Basically, they haven't studied really anything. Some may have taken a course which are being offered today. But again, the institutions or dance schools which have cropped up, I find them very inadequate and very, I feel that they have no business, because what they are sort of really imparting knowledge is hybrid, and also the fact that they themselves haven't really studied quite intensely and extensively. So I tell them, I tell the young ones they're doing their thing, and they bombard it on the social media. And I said, whatever you're doing, you're repeating yourself. I don't see anything innovative happening. And I said, okay, what is your shelf life going to be? Okay, you're a hit 1 year, 2 years. Third year is a big question mark. There are a few dancers who have studied, who come from an Indian classical dance background and then have taken courses and have found their own path, and they are serious ones, but there are a handful of them.
Beautiful.
Whereas on the other hand, the expat who lives overseas has the whole culture there, the whole education is different. They've had the opportunity, or even though they are coming from an Indian classical dance tradition, they've been able to, as I said, take courses which are available, because in India, and for an Indian to go abroad to study is really a very expensive proposition. Yes. It's not sort of everybody can sort of take up and go and study, And then again, when you come back, it's not a bed of roses. I mean, today as I said, 50 years as a profession, and it's still difficult. I mean, people say, oh, but you have a name and you have a certain... I said, yes, but my standards have risen. I have more and platforms are very far and few.
Yeah, definitely.
And one does not depend on the government or... so it's basically, you really got to push your art, push your work. And as I tell some of my young students, once one of my young students said, Astad sir, aap to itne famous hai, so aapko kyun kaam? Famous is a very fickle companion. You're today it's fame, tomorrow who knows. You can't be swayed by your fame. Definitely. You really have to be pushing your own art, and the fact that each creation you do has to be better than the last one you do. Definitely. And what is interesting and challenging in under the contemporary umbrella, that you can choose your themes. It's not necessary that, when a classical dancer performs, they perform and then they'll take up a different story, but it's basically still within the classical frame. And in the contemporary, you bring in theatre, you can bring in puppetry, which I have done. You bring in space, as I said. Yes. So there are all these other options which really, and lighting, so these are all... and today, in the West especially, multimedia has become a norm of presentation. And I'm not really a big fan of multimedia. I mean, it's good, but sometimes in the West today, you don't see a performer, but you see more multimedia sort of works which are being presented or screened. And the dancer then just becomes... doesn't really get to shine as they would in an actual performance.
Definitely.
But again, as the arts... and the other problem we face in India is the lack of finances
Sure.
in order to innovate, in order to experiment. We don't have that luxury.
Sure.
I mean, even like presenters, today when you go in to perform theater, the rentals are so high. The presenter will say, "Okay, you only have 6 hours to set up and sort of get ready." Whereas in the West or even in Asia, you have at least a day to set up before you get to perform. Or there are those kind of difficulties which, or sometimes they club two dancers together. Now, two dancers will have their own different lighting sort of plots. So all that one has to sort of encounter. But then I always say, in the initial stages, I would get very annoyed sometimes with my technical manager because probably he goofed somewhere, and then and that would affect my performance. So I said, well, what the audience doesn't know, it doesn't hurt. So even if he's made a mistake, you just take it in your stride and carry on and perform. Because in the end, the performance has to speak.
Many challenges, and I think Indian contemporary dance form will come on top. So you have been mentioned as a humanitarian champion of society, and through a lot of your work that has come out with across the country with specially abled and the underprivileged. So how does your art help you in your pursuits of taking social responsibility, and how does dance help in spreading a little bit of joy?
Well, initially when I started working in India, Indian classical dancers were not ready to, even sometimes some of them would show an interest, but the fact that they would be rusticated by their guru, they sort of would not take the step forward. And I knew of a theatre director in Calcutta named Zareen Chaudhary, who sort of worked with deaf actors. And I just said to her, I come to Calcutta to perform practically every year in those days. And I said, why don't you take the advantage of my coming? And let's see, why don't I do a workshop for your actors? So, I mean, I just started it as a lark, not realizing that it would continue, and took it upon as a challenge for myself to say, how am I going to teach the people who can't hear and who are going to dance to music? So the first 2 years, I gave them a workshop of a couple of days. And then in the third year, she wrote me a letter saying that I feel my actors, and they've expressed also that could you come for a longer period of time. So I went for 3 weeks, and I sort of worked with them, and I saw the potential. And I said, okay, why don't we try to attempt a performance? So that's how the journey began. And the fact that I look at myself as a catalyst, that I'm able to train, I'm able to give these young performers a platform, an opportunity, and they in turn become role models within their community. So these were sort of thoughts which sort of flowed, and yeah, surprisingly, this is my 31st year that I've been working in the area of working with the deaf, both mainly in India, but I did have a stint in Washington, D.C. At Gallaudet University, which is the world's largest university for the deaf. And I had a good period of about nearly 7 years, not on a regular basis, but going for a couple of weeks or a month when the university invited me either to be an artist in residence or to be a guest choreographer or to curate a program. And yeah, working, and there, because it was a university and their funds was tremendous, I was able to take my Calcutta group twice. And for them, because the facilities which are there, you cannot even imagine here in India.
Definitely.
And we will never have that. So, and even the whole culture of, I think things have changed now, but even among the Indian parents, if they uh, found that their child was deaf, they would try to hide the child, and but there There's so many facilities, and they really have their rights. And so, for to see my group of young actors and actresses, young kids, to spend 1 month on a campus interacting with their American counterparts. And one thing was for an advantage for the Calcutta, because they came from a school called the Oral School for the Deaf, where signing was taught to them, and an American signing was taught to them. So it really became very easy and for them to communicate.
Yes.
And they themselves today, most of them are in touch with me on Facebook and WhatsApp. It's interesting to see my sort of young kids who are now parents and in business, and we're communicating, and and they come to see my performances. One of them is in Chennai, while the others are in Calcutta. The other one's in Australia, Bangalore. One in America. I took her to perform, and she found herself a beau there.
Wow.
And and a complete transformation from the young girl today, and she's very so besotted. So on Facebook, she's all the time posting. But it's good to see. And then at the same time, some of the younger ones, not the younger ones, the same sort of class of actors who are with me. Are sort of living in other parts of the country. So it's good to see, and they follow me, and they, when I'm performing in Calcutta, they come and see the performances. They also have seen other groups. Like after Calcutta, I had another group of performers which came from the Clark School for the Deaf in Chennai, and there this was the group which was the challenging for me, in the sense of the girls who I selected, they were all trained in Bharatanatyam dance already. So they had a dance vocabulary. I mean, they were not as proficient as a normal hearing, but they moved. And then I sort of took it upon myself to create a 60-minute non-stop performance. And again, how do I teach? I teach them to learn to count. And the basic counting is of 8, but it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But it's a sort of rhythmic pattern of counting of 8. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the initial training, whether it's my deaf or whether the other disciplines that I've worked with, they all have to learn this sort of rhythm. And when I say go, everybody has to start counting simultaneously. So then there is synchronization.
Yes.
So by the time 8, everybody's arms comes where they're supposed to, or if their feet, wherever. And with these young dancers, because they were older, then I changed their beat. So, and it was based on the navrasas, the 9 emotions.
Yes.
So each rasa had a different counting beat. So they were like little mini computers. And in fact, at one point of the performance, I switched the music off, but they dance as if they're listening to music.
Wow.
So it has a real impact on the audience. So they were with me, and with that performance, which I call contraposition, we did 75 performances, both in India, and we were fortunate enough to open the 25th Deaf Olympics in Melbourne in the cultural sector. And then the last performance we did was at the invitation of the late President Abdul Kalam, who had invited me to present the work at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. And again, what was very, very touching, that after the performance, President Kalam insisted that he would serve each and every performer himself. And then working in America at the university, then I had a group in Bangalore, which unfortunately did not really pan out the way I wanted to. And I've just started a year ago, young students. Normally, when I work with students, I prefer from the age of 13 onwards.
Right.
But this group of students, which I've selected from the St. Stephen's High School in Mumbai, are between the ages of 8 to 13.
Wow.
So, but again, these kids come from economically deprived background. And again, it's a very good mix of, real integration of all religions there, and they all work in harmony. It's quite challenging, and the kids are bright,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully by this end of this year or early next year, I should come up with a performance for them. It won't be a 60-minute performance, but there will be like, because the kids are still new
Mm-hmm.
to the kind of movement that and I'm not there consistently.
Obviously,
I
yeah.
sort of pop in like a jack in the box, like, okay, we're here now. And it's also quite amazing that these young students have an amazing memory retention. So then I'll say, okay, and
Beautiful.
then sometimes there will be a discrepancy among the two or three, but no, but you've missed this movement. And I said, okay, fine. So that
Beautiful.
also is very inspiring,
Definitely.
and the joy it brings, and I'm just using myself. Similarly, I sort of had a gap, and I started working with the street children of
Mm-hmm.
Delhi,
Mm-hmm.
and there again selected a few of these and mentored them, and they've performed. I've taken them overseas. Like tonight, one of the person who's going to do my lights comes from the streets,
Wow.
and besides being an accomplished puppeteer,
Mm-hmm.
he is now diversifying himself and taking up lighting.
Sure.
So I've taken him on to do the lights today. And
Beautiful.
again, to see, as I said, when you hear their stories,
Mm-hmm.
and you really say, like, these young kids who ran away from home for whatever reasons, and today they're quite successful, or not
Mm-hmm.
quite, they are successful in their own limited way,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden now the parents look at them as cash cows, and whatever little they make, and
Yeah.
the responsibility they take. I mean, stories I could say is really sort of, you salute them.
Definitely, definitely. It's very inspiring and, enthralling to understand the way that you have worked with your art form and the way that it has reached to so many people in such an intrinsic way, such a life-changing way. Amazing. So we have had a beautiful discussion and
Oh, you want
understanding.
to stop? I thought we'd go on.
We
Okay.
could go on.
No.
What do you want to talk about? So we can talk about theater and dance.
Right.
So there is a dichotomy between both of them, and they are both separate art forms, but yet they come together at times. So how do you differentiate between dance and theater, or is there a differentiation, or has it come together?
Well, it has its own sort of identity,
Sure,
but
sure,
yeah, today it's so amalgamated,
sure,
and it's like you can't say, no, you can't bring dance into theater.
sure,
And similarly, I mean, in our Indian classical dance, there is theater, because
sure,
if you look at Kathakali,
sure.
which is the form from Kerala,
Mm-hmm.
and or the stories which even a normal classical dancer says, the expression,
Mm-hmm.
to say, I'm here to see all of you today, and I'm so happy.
Yeah.
And you're quite intrigued, as you ask, what is he going to present this evening? So, and I'll say, yes, you're in for a surprise. So the face itself becomes a sort of like miming, taking different roles of expression. So that becomes theater too. So,
Beautiful.
and also, okay, in dance, they're not really spoken words.
Mm,
Uh,
sure,
so, so there is a, sort of a difference.
sure.
So they go hand in hand,
Uh-huh.
and today, even in like I did Hamlet
Mm-hmm.
um, a few years ago with a Korean theater company,
Mm-hmm.
and it was all in Hangul,
Mm-hmm.
and it was an adaptation, and there was I donned the role of Hamlet's father, the ghost. I was head of the clowns. So
Mm-hmm.
there were roles within the play which I could partake and participate. At the same time, I choreographed it.
Beautiful.
So yeah, it's hand in hand.
Sure, sure. So is there anything that you would like the new artists who are coming to the performance arts platform to realize or understand about themselves, and to is there something from your life journey that you would like to impart to them so that they have a guidance or a beacon to follow to?
Well, I mean, I really, the only advice I can give is, like, first of all, that it's not going to be a bed of roses. Like a lot of kids say, oh, well, if I have Mr. Deboo's lifestyle.
Sure.
And I'll say, no, you won't. like whatever I have managed to achieve, or what I continue to pursue, is still with a lot of hard work,
Definitely.
a lot of dedication, and being true to your work.
Definitely.
And not creating works because, like, at times, like I recall very clearly that the Bill Gates Foundation had sort of asked me to create a work around HIV. And I did have friends overseas who had passed away, but I did not really feel I could justify in taking the money and creating a work which I knew I could create, but it didn't sort of work with me. Like because I said you worked on drugs,
Sure.
but I said, well, it sort of resonated with my creative directions.
Sure.
So yeah, and also the fact that you can't be complacent,
Sure.
because as I said, if you want to pursue, I'm 72 now, and I'm still sort of full of beans and with various projects
Sure.
which are being performed and which are also being talked about for the years to come.
Sure.
So
Sure.
yeah, so good luck if you want to pursue into the performing arena.
Sure.
One of the works of Mahatma Gandhi's thoughts is, and basically it also resonates with my journey, that it says that it's very easy to be a part of a crowd, but it takes courage to stand alone. So, and in my case, it very resonates with my own life that, I chose to stand outside the Indian classical performing arena. And even today, in some ways, I do feel alone of the fact that am still pursuing. But yeah, as they say, the show has to go on.
Definitely. It has to keep going on.
Right.
We look forward to your brilliant performance today
Okay.
at MICA, and
Right.
it's been an enriching experience talking to you, understanding your perspective on so many things, from storytelling to Indian contemporary dance and Indian youth as well. So there are a lot of lessons that are to be taken from this discussion. Starting from how you have to think about your life, how you have to take it in your stride, and you have to learn from your mistakes, and you have to give something back to the society. You have to think about everybody collectively, because it's not an art form for you, it's an art form for everybody that you're performing for, the entire audience, the entire crowd. And ultimately to be individualistic while being a collectivist. So there are a huge amount of lessons that I have learned, and I hope our listeners would also realize and see the perspective that we have drawn here. It was an amazing experience, sir, talking to you, and I hope you enjoyed it too.
My pleasure.
Absolutely,
Right.
definitely. Thank you so much for being here, for being with us. Are there any imparting thoughts?
Nope.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank